Spiking neural networks respond to reward and punishment as though it were actually happening to them on a neurological level, because it kind of is. SNNs are built around the prediction of how our neurons behave, and they can be used to model all sorts of things. That does include seizures. Yes, SNNs have seizures. If you model human neural activity, they do tend to trend towards uncontrolled electrical activity. Yes, spiking neural networks can have seizures. Their mechanism is so similar to our own that they can be used to study the causative mechanism behind seizures in humans. This can be thought of as a weather prediction model. You can predict things like storms, and yes, that can even result in catastrophic storms, and you can study the mechanisms of them. The difference is that we tend to use SNNs to process information as another form of artificial intelligence. Seizures happen, by the way, at least in SNNs, because you try to get all these synthetic neurons to fire simultaneously. You try to get them to process information. However, if they do fire simultaneously, it can cause a runaway mechanism where they fire too much power in one direction, and then it just ends up having uncontrolled electrical storms in the synthetic brain model. Now, back to reward and punishment, because you do need to get something borderline useful out of a system like this. Researchers had the models decipher image information, and if they deciphered it correctly, they would get a dopamine reward. So yes, a model of how our brain reacts to dopamine, and if they got it incorrect, they would then get punished, which would be essentially the lack of dopamine. This was very similar to how our brain reacts to correct or incorrect tasks. And yes, over time, over multiple iterations, they did start to become rewarded more often and be punished less. These were the kinds of images that they actually deciphered, and in my opinion, if this was thrown at me and I got dopamine as a reward for deciphering it correctly, I couldn't tell you if I would get it correct or not. Now, it does make me a little bit uncomfortable, the concept of using this thing that needs to have a dopamine reward in order to appropriately do our computation for us, but it does use significantly less power. In my opinion, one of the most fascinating things about these neural networks is that they require sleep. SNNs need to have some downtime in order to actually process the information that they've received, or they end up going through something called catastrophic forgetting. If they just continuously get new information, they will simply drop all of it and stop functioning. Now, there is another big reason why things like you or me need sleep, and I am assuming you are also a person. We need to clear metabolites out of our cells, so our brains cannot be active continuously or they start to accumulate toxins. And sleep is thought to be one way that we can clear some of them out during our downtime, but there are probably also physical reservoir issues for why we continue to sleep. And yeah, SNNs cannot just be completely shut down, they also require some random spiking activity. They need to have some reinforcement or they will simply forget what they learned during the day, and that is similar to how our brains work when we're sleeping. There's probably a reason why we dream, we're just not entirely sure why we dream. The leading theories on human dreaming is that we are processing information that we accumulated during the day. One of the other really interesting discoveries we found with spiking neural networks is that they require a variety of neurons. One of the other really interesting discoveries, in my opinion, that us humans have found with spiking neural networks is you require a variety of different kinds of neurons. We can stitch together a bunch of the exact same kind of neuron, and it will process information because that's what neurons are designed to do. They are biological memristors, meaning they remember the current that passes through them, but if you just have the same kind, it will be limited. In order to process complex information, it does better if you have different kinds of memristors. I know it seems like humans are just reverse engineering the brain one piece at a time, and that is exactly what we're doing. We had to figure out how to model a neuron before we could figure out how to model a variety of neurons, and we are getting better at it, just one step at a time. Thank you for letting me narrate this field to you as it progresses, because I find it really fascinating and I'm glad that somebody wants to listen. If you enjoyed this, follow for more.